Hi, my name is Stan.
My name is Connie.
My name is Judy.
My name is Alien, and I'm a caregiver to my mother.
And I care for my mother, Octavia.
And I'm a caregiver for my mother.
And I'm a caregiver to my husband, Art.
I'm a caregiver for my wife, Ann, who's 72 years old.
Basically, I've done everything for providing for both of them.
I take care of my mother on the weekends. I take her grocery shopping.
Not only household chores,
I provide her medical care, coordination, driving, errands.
choosing meals, making meals, cleaning up.
I find that I take care of anything that he can't take care of.
Sometimes I find balancing time a real challenge.
The difficult part for me is taking me into consideration.
Balancing her needs with the needs of my family, the needs of my marriage, and my own needs.
Staying calm, nice, and positive.
The real challenge is, of course, the distance and the moment you get that last phone call.
What I love most about taking care of her is knowing that we're providing a secure and comfortable home for her.
It's the time we spend together.
Is the adventure of finding out new things all the time to trying to help him stay out of pain.
My name is Ed. I'm a spouse and I'm a caregiver.
My name is Colette. I'm a daughter and a caregiver.
I'm a caregiver, and I'm a daughter.
And I'm a wife and a caregiver.
I'm a daughter and a caregiver.
I'm a son, a nephew, and a caregiver.
Hi, my name is Deborah Day, and I help manage United Way Caregivers Coalition. While caring for a loved one has its special rewards, it's a very challenging job. It can be stressful, overwhelming, and sometimes lonely. Each caregiving situation is unique, but all caregivers share the need for information and support. And that's where the Caregivers Coalition comes in. We help caregivers receive the support they need to take care of their loved ones and to take care of themselves. Caregivers who lead healthy, productive lives will be better caregivers. The most important thing to remember is that as a caregiver, you're not alone.
Most of the presentations I give are usually about the science of dementia, the science of behavioral problems, the science of the depression and the anxiety, and the medications we use to treat them, and the side effects we run into, and so on and so forth. I was asked to do this talk by multiple groups of caregivers, and I have given this actually twice already, once in Monmouth and once in Ocean County, with a focus on there are a lot of things in life which does get better as we get older. We definitely get wiser, smarter, more patient, but a lot of things do improve in our brain as we get older, and we kind of need to capitalize on that. So that's really the purpose of this particular talk, and the title is Improving with Age. So they did, I don't know if you guys saw those studies about 2 years ago. The National Institute of Health did a study across generations of which generation, they took it by decades, so 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. Which decade of life is the happiest and most content decade with their current life? Anybody wants to take a jab on it? Actually, it was the 60s. And which is the decade which has the most turmoil, depression, and anxiety? 20s. So see, a lot of things do get better with age. So if we think of ourselves across the lifespan, humans we are pack animals. We are social creatures. We cannot survive alone. We have to always be with our pack, kind of like wolves and dogs and a whole bunch of other animals. And if you really think about it from an existential perspective, we are predators because we need to hunt so that we can eat. We face aggressive rivals because we're fighting over space, land, water, food supply. We have a lot of challenges around us so that we can survive. So there's always the fight for survival. And if you, again, think of it as like any other human being, like any other living organism, the ones who do best surviving are ones with thick skin, sharp teeth, quick reflexes, can camouflage very easily in nature, right? So who are the ones who survive very well? Are people who are thick-skinned, could very care less about what other people think. They're very sharp teeth. They can go after what they want, and they grab it, and they take no prisoners. They're very quick to act, and then they can blend and make things work for them, around them, without really stirring the pot a lot. So if you really start thinking of it from that perspective, you can see how people who do well are the survivors. So again, humans, like any other primates, have to have a group to live with. Now, that's for survival, for protection, and for reproduction, or else the human race will go away. So social interaction becomes very important because you're living in a group with all kind of different personalities and mindset and ways of thinking. So managing stress becomes a very important survival mechanism. So if you're someone who cannot take criticism, a constant perfectionist, really cannot handle any type of stress, you're not going to do well in the big picture of survival. And their studies are very clear that people who are in their 20s and 30s cannot figure out a way to manage their stress, they actually live much shorter lifespan than people who can. So managing stress is a direct correlation with healthy longevity, with health benefits and longevity. So the social relationships, we start forming our social relationships when we're in young adulthood. So a big part of the pressure in adolescents and in their 20s is the idea that from a primitive perspective, we're going after reproduction. That is the main purpose of our social relationships in our 20s and 30s, from a basic primitive need. So from a basic primitive need for the survival of the species, in your 20s and 30s, you got to be focused on reproduction. So the pressure and the stress is mostly about the relationship which leads to reproduction. It's the dating, it's the getting married, it's the having children, getting pregnant accidentally, boys really losing their brain and trying to spread their seeds everywhere. Because that is the primitive basis of every living organism. Now, we are a social organism. So there are rules to that. That puts stress and pressure on us. If we were just like any other organism where, the males will go around and just spread their seeds and the females will just have the kids and take care of themselves until the kids grow and on their own, it will be a different social structure. That's not our social structure. Our social structure is we need to have a family, we need to take care of it, we need to raise the kids, responsibility, money, housing, food. So that causes a lot of stress in that age cohort. Now, there is also a competition which we are not very aware of, which is for the healthier genes. So there is a certain primitive sense in us where we are under stress and pressure to have healthy children. So we're not running around and having kids with our sisters and brothers because those are not healthy genes. So that puts pressure on the structure on the social structure, because we need to reach outside our gene pool so that we can get healthy genes. Now, that in of itself, because of our social structure, becomes sometimes a problem. Here is the 20-year-old Catholic girl who's now in love with this Jewish young man whose mother is going to hang them if they get married because the kids are not going to be Jews. So that is a lot of social pressure, a lot of stress, which is on that generation. So we tend to be in larger groups. So the larger groups become cohorted into what we're comfortable with. There's the Catholic Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Jews, the Chinese people, the Dominicans. So we end up, conglomerating in larger groups, which can be good because that gives support for the people who belong to that group. A lot of times the churches, the temples, the community centers are the main support for people in that cohort, but it also puts pressure on people to being able to venture out of those groups. So everything has a positive and a negative, especially in that age cohort. So as we get older, here you are in your midlife. You're done with that. You had the kids. They grew up. They went to college. Their headaches grow with them. The headache of a 3-year-old is kind of this size. The headache of a 30-year-old is this size. So there's more pressure in your 40s and 50s because now you're the parents of the teens and the 20s. So there's a lot of pressure there, which is why a lot of people in their 50s is when they're really very stressed out, because now they're what we call the sandwich generation. They're usually taking care of older parents who are in their 80s and 90s, at the same time taking care of children who are in their teens or 20s. So that causes a lot of pressure, depression, anxiety, issues with relationships. But as you're getting out of that period, getting into your 60s is when a lot of times the parents are deceased, so that part is gone, and the children they're in their 30s. So, I've done my best, I've done all I could, they're on their own now. So there is a return to this duality. People who are married feel that either the marriage is not good, got to dissolve. The highest incidence of divorce in the last 10 years is among people in their 60s. Because a lot of women would have stayed because they wanted to raise the kids, they don't want to have any financial turmoil, whatever, so they get divorced. Or the relationship becomes really good and solid because now the kids are out of the way, so they can focus on themselves and do things together and things they enjoy. So the relationship goes back to this duality. So they're empty nesters, so they don't have to worry about the children. Now, another stress in that decade of life is the relationship you have with the children. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be really bad, it can be not here or there. So that is a lot of, that relationship between the parent and the sibling and the children becomes, the offsprings, become a source of stress and anxiety and nervousness. And the 30-year-old just got married and they're having a hard time getting pregnant. So who's the one who's in the psychiatrist's office, anxious and nervous and cannot sleep? The mother, the grandma. Well, I don't know. He really wants a baby, and I don't know what she's doing, and they're not telling me, and I know they're going to doctors, and I don't know what she's doing, and they're kind of keeping it a secret. So we put undue pressure on ourselves with stress and anxiety over things which we really can't control. But this is the way we are as humans, because these are our offsprings, and they're always going to forever be our children. So the way we always advise people in their 60s, form your own new relationships. You cannot totally depend on having your children come in every Sunday for a Sunday dinner. Start making your own friendships, start volunteering, start doing something new, find a new purpose in life. And you find a lot of people, actually it's on the AARP website advertisement thing, is that this is a new chapter in your life and you have to start trying new things which you've never thought you could try before. You didn't have the time or the energy to do it before. So instead of really using all your energy in getting stressed out and nervous and anxious and depressed over what your offsprings are doing, focus on you. Find new hobbies, start knitting, travel with a new bunch of people, volunteer. You got to find a new purpose in life. And I think Alicia may have left. She is one of our social workers, and she has a big psychotherapy group, practice. And this is what psychotherapists and social workers, psychologists who deal with patients who are in their 60s is, let's find you something else to do besides just sitting there and worrying. Find a purpose. And then they start kind of doing homework, you know. You're gonna go and look up certain things, and the next time you're gonna join an organization, you're gonna do one activity, start swimming, a lot of people would say, oh my God, I couldn't imagine myself doing this, and look, I'm doing it now. Especially the current cohort of people like you guys who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. This is a very, very healthy generation because you guys took care of yourselves when you were 20s and 30s. They're people who like to exercise, they enjoy activities, they're not socially isolated, and this is the cohort of people who are going to have the longevity. They're gonna live into the 80s and 90s and the 100s. There is a projected study which says that people who are born now and the next 10 years are going to be the first generation, which about 80% of them are going to live above 100. Because we have much better medical care, and we start the medical care and the prevention earlier, and people take care of themselves.
Did you say 80%?
Yes.
80%?
Yes. People who are living now, 100 years from now, who are born now, 100 years from now, are going to still be alive. So they're projecting that right now, the most recent statistic is that the average lifespan of a male is 76, and for a female is 79. Now, that's the average.
Is that for the baby boomers?
That's for the baby boomers. Well, no. These are for people who are going to be born between now and 10 years from now. Baby boomers are probably going to be in their 80s. The baby boomers are the generation which is going to follow you guys. And they're going to probably push the average life expectancy into the 80s. It is right now 79 for a female. So if you think of all the young people who die in childbirth, accidents, drug overdoses, so most of this, remember the 79 is an average. So the people who are currently living, who are female, are all way in their 80s. Because it's an average. So the ones who died younger will pull the average down. Which means there's going to be, and this is going to be my next thing, is going to be many, many more different kinds of levels of living. Because one of the bigger stress and a cause of a lot of anxiety is, where am I going to live when I'm in my 70s? I have raised my children in that same house. Now I'm in my 70s, planning for when I'm in my 80s. I am going to have the arthritis. I'm not going to be able to go up the stairs. I am not sure I can take care of this huge big house by myself. So sociologically, you would notice that there are many, 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 many more above 55 living, being erected everywhere, because this is what people are going to need. They're going to want to live somewhere where they can get everything from the grocery store. I know they're not up here yet in New Jersey. I don't know if we have any of where they have the grocery store, the pharmacy, these are like towns. They have them all over Florida. So you would think it's like a town. So there is the grocery store, there's the pharmacist, there is the florist, there is the beauty shop, there is the tennis courts, the pool, everything in a really gated community. And then they have those, in Florida, they have golf carts, which, like would go pick you up. If you want to go to the grocery store, pick you up with a golf cart. They take you to the grocery store, you get your groceries, and you go home. And then they have all sorts of, and these are independent living. This is independent living. You have your own little house, but then they have supporting agencies. So when you need people to clean your house or people to, cook your meals or whatever, you basically just pay an extra, it's part of the maintenance fee. Because this is one of the biggest cause of anxiety for people in their 70s and 80s. I grew up in this house, I raised my kids in this house, what am I gonna do with the house? So you see more younger and younger people moving out of, look in New Jersey here. These condos are like sprouting up everywhere. People are downsizing, selling their big homes and moving into a condo. One level, and most of these condos will have access to pools and gyms and other activities and like a community hall. And then the next level will be assisted living, continuum of care facilities. So as you get older, the real incidence of depression and anxiety is actually going to go down. Again, as I said, people in their 60s and 70s have much less depression than people in their 20s and 30s. But there is this perceived stress, which you got to do something about, or else it's going to eat up on you. So one of the other biggest stressors, in addition to this offsprings, is losing a partner, either due to health problems or accidents or just older. So that is a real stressor, especially on a relationship where the duality was there for a long time. I've been with somebody for 40 years and then they suddenly have a heart attack and they pass away. That is a very big stress. Now, a lot of times people mix up grief and normal grief with depression. And I see this all the time. The daughter will usually come in and say, oh, my father is just so horribly depressed. Well, what happened? Well, my mother died like a month ago, and he's not getting out of the house, he's not eating, he's not preparing his meals, I don't know what to do with him. It's a month. Most probably the wife did everything for this gentleman. She prepared the meals, she did the social agenda, she decided where they're going, when. He probably doesn't even have phone numbers of his friends to call. But again, we are a society which wants instant gratification. A lot of those families will be very upset because I cannot just give the father a pill where he just can get over it. Take the pill and start eating and sleeping and go out and do whatever. You need time for any life change, especially if it is losing a partner after you've been with them for 30, 40 years. So we need to allow that as a normal reaction. And as you get older, your ability to really accept change and move with change slows down, becomes harder. So again, I have a lot of children who would come in and say, I've been telling my parents they got to leave that house. It's just not doable. They have 5 rooms. I don't know what they want why do they want the 5 rooms? They only live in the kitchen and 1 room. They really need to move. They need to go to a condo. I found this gorgeous, great condo, and I want to move them. It takes time. The younger generation will have a hard time understanding why would it take 2 years for you to sell your house and get rid of everything in it and move into a condo. So there's a lot of generational understanding or misunderstanding of the concept of stress, anxiety, and depression. Another big issue which people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s face is loss of a child, either to health problems, where they actually die, or as simple as getting married. And you will be surprised how many times, and I have to say, it's a lot of times mothers who are very close to their boys who they feel that the boy was stolen by this other woman. I lost my child. Well, what do you mean? Well, he got married and moved to Hawaii. Okay. Well, I mean, yes, I can see that. If you've had someone who even was living around the corner, used to come and visit you every Sunday because you did the Sunday dinners. And when I worked up at Claremont, this was a very big thing for all the Italian families because they all had to do Sunday dinner. And now there's no Sunday dinner, especially if the boy married a non-Catholic girl. That's like the end of the world. So the loss of a child, even if it is to marriage or misunderstanding or even like moved for a job, sometimes they would come into the office and they would be sobbing because the child had to move, 3-4 states away for a job. Again, the solution to that, find your own purpose in life. Your purpose cannot be waiting for your child to call or come in and visit. Because a lot of people, that becomes the center of their life, is when are my kids coming, what am I doing, rather than what do I want to do. And I have to say, at times, children are not used to that. For example, I get that also a lot. I call my mother to come and babysit, and she's too busy because she has her, bridge club. Okay, well, your mother is entitled to have her own life. You did not plan this babysitting thing, so it becomes a very big, I just decided to go to the movies today, and I call my mother, and she's at the bridge club. But that's good for the mother. It's not good for the relationship between the child and the mother, but it's good for the mother. So these are all things which really need to be worked out as we get older. Now, another opportunity which the elderly have is forming new relationships based on common interests. So you may have never thought that you would enjoy knitting or playing cards or bird watching, and now you find a group of people who you come from very different walks of life, but that's your common interest. So that becomes your support group, which sometimes is hard for families to understand that, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the person who's in it, who's looking for something new in life. So you start forming these small, coherent, very well-knit groups outside the family unit. Now, there are multitude of studies out there which shows that social isolation has a direct correlation with early onset dementia and early mortality. People who are actually isolated die quicker and earlier than people who have good social network and interactions. It was actually, I think, last night on one of the nightly news, how there is a company now which that's all they do is they help people get social interactions and, start planning groups and stuff like that. Because it is one of the things which every single discipline in medicine, whether it's the cardiologists, the oncologists, the psychiatrists, primary care, social isolation is going to affect your health negatively. Lack of social support has a very big negative impact on health. Actually, there were studies which showed that social isolation is worse for your cardiac health than smoking or increased cholesterol levels. So it's a very big problem, because for us to be able to develop the social networks, we need a lot of brain activity. It really is a lot of brain networking to try to be able to find where you stand in that group of people. Social isolation puts all that area of the brain, which is our frontal lobe, kind of to sleep. And the longer it is asleep, the harder it is to wake it up. So the more social isolated you are, the harder it is going to be to start going out and doing things. So that's why we want to prevent it before people get into it. Because once you get into it, it's very, very hard to pull you out of it. It's linked to early mortality. Now, another predictor of early Alzheimer's disease, rapid progression of Alzheimer's disease, and early mortality in the elderly is a sedentary lifestyle. There have been multiple studies which shows that 20 minutes of moderate exercise a day will actually delay the progression of Alzheimer's disease by about 2 years. Yoga and Tai Chi has actually delayed the progression of Alzheimer's disease by about 2 to 4 years. It actually works better than Aricept, which is, the medicine which we normally use for. Now, again, we are in a society and a culture where it's much easier to take a pill than have to, join a group and try to find a yoga session and try to do Tai Chi, and the insurance companies will very quickly pay for us to go get blood work and a pill, while they're not going to pay for us to do the yoga and the Tai Chi. Although I have to say, there are multiple now commercial insurances like the Cigna and the Aetna, United and Horizon, who actually are paying for their members to go to the gym, and they are reducing the premiums if you prove that you are consistently in an exercise group. Because think of the money they're going to be saving when the member is healthy. The member does not develop stress and anxiety and depression and dementia. They're not going to have to spend on taking care of those diseases. And an elderly person who is not stressed out, not anxious, not depressed, and not cognitively impaired is going to take much better care of their diabetes and high blood pressure. They're going to remember to take their medications. They're going to check their blood sugar. They're going to eat healthier. They're going to walk more. So all in all, you're going to be much better and much more well, and that's what the insurance companies want. So here are the takeaway points. And I think everybody in this room has already kind of done these things. So you have to take these and tell other people to do it. Because the mere fact that you're here means that you've done these things. So you're going to make new friends as you get older. You're going to join exercise groups. You walked around and drove up here and got here. You're going to volunteer. This is a volunteer-based organization you're in. And you're going to venture out of your comfort zone. I've never done yoga in my life. So what? Most gyms, Y's, senior centers now have beginner yoga for elderly people who've never tried yoga before. Try it. Tai Chi. There are some older people who would like to start jumping out of planes. I'm not recommending that, but you got to venture out of your comfort zone, because that's how you're going to push your brain to do something different. Go on a singles cruise. I've never done this before. Well, there's got to be a first time for everything. So, and it'll feel, I can do this, so I do something else, and I could do something else, and I do something else. So that's my didactics part of the talk. So I'll take any questions, and I'll repeat the question so that everybody else hear it, and hopefully get you an answer. The answer here is going to depend on the level of the dementia and level of the cognitive impairment. That is why we strongly encourage all these things to happen while the patient is still in the very, very early or the mild stages. Because the normal progression of the disease, which is very frustrating for the caregivers, is that when it gets to moderate or severe, then the brain is not going to be capable of doing any of those things anymore. And that is the hardest part for the caregiver to understand. So I will see children always saying to me, all what my father wants to do is sit in the chair and stare at the same spot all day long. Because at that moment, there is not enough brain activity left for them to be able to do anything different. Now, a lot of times that is misdiagnosed as depression. That elderly gentleman who is so cognitively impaired that he's sitting, even with the TV on, he's still staring at the same spot on the wall, that patient is not depressed, and antidepressants are not going to work. That patient who's refusing to eat is not going to eat no matter what we do. Even we give them tons of antidepressants because that is the stage of dementia that they're in. So it gets to, dementia does get to a stage where you cannot make them do anything. The time to try to get them to do these things is when they are in an earlier stage. And if you get to a point where you're fighting with your loved one to try to do something, then they're beyond it. You're causing more damage than good by trying to fight with them. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do anything at all. Now, another thing which is fascinating, and we see this a lot in our hospice practice, is music therapy. You can have end-stage dementia. You cannot say your name. You cannot recognize your children. You get someone to play music from the time and the era which this person was in their 30s and 40s. That person who does not say anything will sing the song with exact words, absolutely correctly. I have patients on our hospice service who corrects the music therapist who's young, who cannot really recite all Frank Sinatra's songs. They will correct that she's using the wrong word in a song. So there are little things, music therapy, pet therapy. If the patient was, big dog lover, and a lot of programs now do that, nursing homes do that, cat lover, dog lover, whatever it is, use that piece. So you want to use as much as you can of whatever is so ingrained in their brain to kind of give them some comfort. But again, you have to recognize where are they in their cognitive impairment and not push it to where you're fighting with them. Yes, sir. So the question is, the patients who are at a level of a moderate to severe dementia where they're really not interactive, not being able to interface with their environment, and they're staring at one spot, sometimes they would get off that spot and interact with somewhere else. So what's going on in their brain? The nature of all dementias, whether it's Alzheimer's or anything else, is that it eats up brain cells and eats up the connections between the brain cells. So that same person, again, whom I just described, who hears the music and starts singing and, reciting lyrics, would not remember or have the ability or the connection in the brain to remember that 10 minutes ago they were staring at the ceiling. So there's really nothing much going on in there. That's when they are moderate to severe. The sad part is when they are in the mild phase. That's when they will realize that there's something wrong. I am trying to connect thought A to thought B, and I can't. And that's the phase where the patients, 30% of patients with any sort of dementia in mild to moderate phases will meet full criteria for major depression and will need treatment with antidepressants because it will make a difference in their ability to cope with their illness. Technically, right, so what is going on in the neurons in the brain when someone moves from staring to actually doing something? It is very much like if you have an electric circuit which is shortchanged, right? So you have a circuit in front of you with 20 connections, and you're trying to find out, that tester. So you put it on the one tester, nothing happens. The other tester, nothing happens. You put it on a third tester, it looks totally normal. The connections in the brain, they are not uniformly dead. They're not uniformly killed. So something hits one connection which is working, and it's fine. And then you see this a lot with caregivers who would say, I don't know what happened yesterday. We sat there and had a normal, lucid conversation like nothing is going on. And this morning we're back to, staring at the ceiling. It's a circuit which somehow fired. Nobody really knows what or where. And it very much depends on the cause of the dementia. See, dementia is a symptom. It can be vascular dementia, multiple strokes. It can be Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is just basically a neurodegenerative disease which for no reason brain cells start dying, but we know the order of where they die in. They start dying in the temporal lobe, which is the memory area, then they go into the parietal lobe, then they go into the frontal lobe. So if somebody has pure Alzheimer's disease, I can draw you a map, a line of what capacities are they going to lose when. But pure Alzheimer's disease, especially nowadays, is very rare. Most of the time, it is combined with vascular dementia because people have had strokes. The most common cause of kind of mixed dementias, which we are seeing coming up, is concussion-related. People who played sports, a lot of people who've played sports in high school are going to start having problems in their 50s and 60s, and they're not going to link it back to the fact that I had 6 concussions when I played ball and baseball in high school. So whenever there's that element, then Parkinson's disease, we don't really know why is Parkinson's disease happening, and it's happening in a lot of patient population at a younger age. There's all sorts of hypotheses, toxins around us, pollution, the food we're eating. So depends on what is the underlying cause of the dementia, depends what circuit is dead. So if you hit the circuit which is working, now the reason music and pet therapy works is because it is controlled by our right side of the brain, while our language is controlled by our left side of the brain. So you can be totally, what we call totally aphasic, cannot speak, cannot say anything, because the left side of the brain is all gone. But music and art, see, a lot of people can draw very pretty pictures. They can do any artistic stuff because it's the right side of the brain. I'm sure you guys have all heard of the Parkinson's disease patients who are stiff as boards, and then when you put music on and they start dancing, and then you stop the music and they're back stiff as boards. And it is it is the same pathways in the brain which tells the patient, which tells us move. But the higher order is coming from a different area in the brain, which makes us move. I thought they made a movie about that, Parkinson's disease patients dancing.
Yeah, there is a documentary. There's a movie.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Oliver Sacks is the one who did these studies.
Was the son a doctor?
Oliver Sacks, I don't remember, but I know Oliver Sacks, the neurologist in Columbia. He's the one who did these studies. He's the one who did a lot of the studies with the music, and he was a musician himself. So it's fascinating. The brain is totally fascinating. Right. So the question is about Lewy body dementia. So we are learning more and more about subtypes of dementia. About 20 years ago, we started noticing that the patients whom we called Alzheimer's disease, there is a subset of them who, instead of starting normally, what is Alzheimer's is the first thing that goes away is mild memory. So you start forgetting where you put your keys, where did you park your car, where did you put your wallet. Then you start accusing people of, you took my stuff. I am sure I had $200 in this wallet and I was going to go pay the rent. And they totally forgot that they just went and paid the rent and the money's gone out of the wallet. Then after that becomes the inability to use forks and spoons, and they're going like this, and they're trying to eat soup with a fork. And then the next thing which comes is they start not being able to put the right foot in front of the left foot. Then they can't put pants on, and they're putting the shirt on backwards. So we know exactly how Alzheimer's disease goes. And then it gets to a point, which is, when you're accusing other people of doing things, you start talking to your wife, thinking she's your mother, waking up in the middle of the night, making, very convinced that you just had a conversation with your sister who's been dead for 20 years, that kind of thing. So there's a subset of patients who we would have normally called Alzheimer's disease. We started noticing that the first thing which happens is the psychosis piece. So these are, retired teachers who would get up in the morning, get dressed, put their makeup on, goes to the living room, set up chairs like this, and start teaching a class. and they're very convinced that there are students in the class. Or this Italian woman who would set up a long table because she has all these cousins and aunts and nieces and nephews eating Sunday dinner, and she really genuinely believes that people are there. So the way clinically, we are about 90% accurate when we make a clinical diagnosis. We're 100% on an autopsy. So they started autopsying the brain of these people, and they noticed that in these people who become psychotic, they start being stiff and Parkinsonian before their memory is totally gone. So it doesn't make any sense, because in Alzheimer's, it's memory, psychosis, then gait. So they did Sinai, Columbia, they all have brain banks of patients who would, that's the research piece. So they discovered that in these, and it is about 20% of patients with dementia, so it's not nothing. So now you're hearing more and more people with Lewy body, because 20 years ago we just had called them Alzheimer's disease. We noticed that there's a subset of patients where the plaques, which forms in the brain, which kills the neurons, start in the frontal lobe, go to the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. While in Alzheimer's disease, it starts in temporal, comes to parietal, goes to frontal. So this is called Lewy body dementia. You may hear it referred to as frontotemporal dementia. The damage starts in the frontal lobe, where you're psychotic first, then you have the gait abnormality, because it kind of goes backwards in the brain. Now, it's not real Parkinson's disease, it's Parkinsonianism, which looks like Parkinson's. The main differentiation is that kind of symptoms do not respond to carbidopa like Parkinson's disease would. The psychosis in Lewy body dementia does not respond to antipsychotics. Actually, we know if you give them antipsychotics, they get worse. And that's one of the diagnostic tests. Sometimes, someone is so agitated and so psychotic, they end up in the emergency room, they give them Haldol, they become much more psychotic. Then that's clearly Lewy body dementia. Most of the time, that psychosis is not associated with agitation unless you challenge the delusion. So we work with caregivers on, she wants to set a table and feed people imaginary food, fine. She wants to, teach an imaginary class, fine. Have a conversation with a dead husband all night, as long as it is not bothering the patient or affecting their lifestyle. But we cannot really treat it with any medications, we're just going to make it worse. So that's really the differentiation. Now, there is a very high correlation between Lewy body dementia and trauma to the brain. So you see a lot of patients, like the athletes, the concussions, they're really not developing. We used to call, that's a separate class, which we call dementia pugilistica, which is what Muhammad Ali had. Everybody says Muhammad Ali had Parkinson's. We cannot make a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease on someone who's had his brain beaten up a zillion times. That's dementia pugilistica. It's the same thing with all these, young football players, but there is an element like Robin Williams. That's what he had, and that's why he took his life. So there's a very big element of the psychosis becoming depression, and what's life worth, and then a lot of these athletes, shoot themselves. The problem with vascular dementia is you cannot, because it depends on where are the strokes happening. See, and that's how and I wish I had a board, I like to draw these things. In vascular disease, it depends on where is that small vessel which caused that area. So the way we describe vascular disease, it goes this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. Very sudden drops. So we know that there was an incident which happened. It depends on where the stroke is. Now, those are the patients who has the hardest time with things like, you talk to them about, their wedding, and they can tell you, or even if the wedding was, 3 weeks ago, they may be able to remember that particular thing. You ask them, what did they have for breakfast? They can't remember. They can remember family members, but they can't remember grandchildren. So it really is very abrupt, and we cannot predict it, and we cannot predict prognosis of vascular disease either. Because if you had a whole bunch of small strokes and now your blood sugar is controlled and your blood pressure is controlled, you may not have any more. So your level of functioning may continue to be there until your next massive stroke. While with Alzheimer's disease, we can, to the day, tell you how the progression is going to be. Right, so the question is, how can the caregiver know if the loved one is aware of what's happening to them? We use facial expression, and for example, when we are trying to diagnose depression in the elderly, in the elderly demented patient, we use the same tools we use with children. They're not going to be able to tell you, obviously, but they're agitated, they're not sleeping, they are in a hypervigilant state, so you know that they're not comfortable. You will be able to tell when the elderly is not comfortable, an elderly demented person. We tend to project a lot of what we think because we have our total brain. So if I would look at this person, I would say, oh my God, I'll be bored out of my mind if I sat there for 6 hours in a row. What you do not know is that person does not have a concept of time, because the ability to measure time is gone. So you would go in and say to someone, good morning, and then you come back 7 hours later, and to them it's still good morning, because they lose the ability to measure time. And that's very common in children too. But then, again, that's why with the elderly, with a caregiver, sometimes you need to do that instant gratification. Because you cannot tell, so they say, I want a cookie. If you say, okay, I'm going to go do this, this, and that, and then bring the cookie, you're going to be in trouble. Because they cannot measure that time and wait for the cookie. So you need to get the cookie. And then you're going to really avoid a whole bunch of agitation and yelling and screaming, because if you bring the cookie 30 minutes later, they forget that they wanted the cookie. All they would remember is something happened that got them mad. So it's really a lot like taking care of children, which is, a very hard thing for a caregiver to see their loved ones in that state. Any other questions?
That was a very good answer, don't you just get the cookie quickly?
Yes.
Because I have to deal with, if I didn't get that cookie right away, it's like, why didn't you get the cookie?
Right.
And I'm like, here's the cookie. No. But why didn't you get it when I wanted it to?
And it becomes this huge big battle, and it's about anything and everything.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's really when we do the intervention with treating the elderly, it's a lot of behavioral modification to the caregiver. What is important? What is not important? Pick your battles. They want to take a shower, sponge bath once a week. Let it be. You don't have to fight with them to bathe them each and every day. They want to eat breakfast at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Doesn't matter. You do what you can.
It's not hurting themselves.
As long as yes. So you have to do a lot of behavioral modification at what your expectations are, which is not easy to watch a loved one, especially if it is someone whom was very organized, got up every morning and did the same thing, and got dressed, and people have a hard, because you remember this is not the same person anymore, because their brain is very different, and that's a very hard thing for for people to see.
So I work with someone. I have a client who takes me.
So the question is, how do you kind of co-care for someone with dementia? This reminds me very much of my current nephew, who's 3 years old, whose mother is having another baby, and when she has her mother watching her son, she has the 3-year-old very regimented. He gets up, he gets dressed, he gets his allergy medicine at 8 o'clock in the morning, he does whatever, and then he does this at noon. When the mother is taking care, when his grandmother is taking care of him, he's out of bed at 9, he's running around in his pajamas till noon, never took the allergy medicine, he had an ear infection, which he was supposed to take antibiotics twice a day, and then she did skip the first dose, and you cannot do that. And you got to relax, and this is what I tell my sister-in-law. You got to relax. It's not the end of the world if they miss this dose or that dose. And in a patient with dementia, it's probably even less important. Obviously, nothing major is going to happen if they miss a dose here, miss a dose there. Now, in that particular case, and this is something which when I speak to actual physicians and nurses, and you want to try to minimize what you want to do for the patient. Expecting an elderly demented person to take medicine 3 times a day is expecting a lot. Because half of the time they're going to spit it out, they're not going to want to take it, they're not going to want to eat something, it's going to upset their stomach. So try to consolidate that into once a day. What I do on the hospice and palliative medicine, a lot of this, and it's hard for physicians to let go. Sometimes you got to let go. This is a patient who obviously does not have much brain function. What am I giving him that he needs to take 3 times a day? I'm pretty sure I can find a high blood pressure medicine which he can take once a day. But a lot of times you see those patients are taking the vitamin A's and B's and D's and C's and the calcium and the this and that. The first thing I do when I get a patient, a geriatric patient, is stop all that. Because by the time you've made it to 80-some years old and you already have Alzheimer's disease, these supplements are not going to do nothing for you except give you stomachache, which is very hard for the caregivers to. But he's been taking these pills all his life. The doctor said he has to take the pills. So again, unless there is major harm, you got to work with. It's not worth fighting. It's not worth for the significant other to fight with him to try to get him out of bed to do that. He probably, just like a child, will do much better with a nanny than they would do with their mother. If you're the outside caregiver who's coming in and doing the care, a lot of times these elderly will get up and do what they have to do, just like a kid would do with their nanny. And the minute the mother or the grandmother is trying to take care of the kid, the whole thing goes out the window. Well, thank you very much, guys. This was fun. Thank you.